must all say no. We've seen it time and time again. War's not the way to go. We rage to end all war.
Hello. This is a wonderful day to talk about freedom. This is a perfect place to say, what is this about? This is not about people who wants to make a revolt, but people who likes to live in peace and justice and out of oppression.
The way thou hast brought the mind, let us into the...
Occupy has the values and the message and the system of government, and we have changed the terms of debate.
These racist scum have got to go away.
The naming committee report on is agenda item number 10. Who's the chair?
I'm the convener.
Sally?
And thank you. We're glad to entertain the idea to rename the old Post Office Plaza in honor of the Straleys and Charlotte Adams. As we talked about it, we thought it would be an interesting idea to propose to the council that considering that certainly not in any way to take away from the Straleys or Charlotte Adams, but knowing that over time there will most likely be other people who would deserve the recognition of being honored in the same or similar way, that it might be an interesting idea to name the plaza with the name of a concept and then have the Straleys and Charlotte Adams be the first two people or three people who were honored by having their names associated with the plaza.
Okay. Thank you, Sally. Joe Herzenberg wanted to comment on this. Joe?
Good evening. First, I have a quiz. Why is it that that little piece of land there in front of the post office is what it has become? Is that clear enough? That is, why do people gather there for political protests, etc.?
My name is James Rasheed. Well, we decided we're going to have a hunger strike on front of the post office on Franklin Street. It was public ground. That's why we picked that spot, because, they'd have a hard time removing us because it's owned by the post office, not by the town of Chapel Hill. We got sleeping blankets, and that's where we bogged down there. 24 hours round the clock every day. After a couple of days, you couldn't eat nothing no way because your body ain't got adjusted to not eating. That last 2 or 3 days, I feel like I was burning up on the inside. So I know it was that was awesome. Bleeding ulcers make you weak. I'm talking about real weak. But I just refused to leave. It took a long time to go away. I hope the hunger strike would change some of the minds and some of the minds of the merchants, get them to thinking that a plate of food and the color of your skin shouldn't make that much difference. Personally, I just couldn't understand it. I still don't understand it this day. I have some time that I wanted to quit, but I said to myself, no, I can't. It just ain't right, and I ain't gonna quit. Giving up is not an option. Someone or somebody had to keep the ball going. It was scary. What my personal, deep down inside, I knew what had to be done. I was walking across the campus, and I don't know, cops, I don't know who, one of the officers recognized me and said I was trespassing. They said I was trespassing carried out of town and locked me up. We brought the post office costs because it was government property, and no one could run us away but the federal government.
I protested at Peace and Justice Plaza more times than you got fingers and toes, but it was always with the cafeteria workers. We're going to the schools, education, doing so many things.
The first time I was involved in any kind of protest was joining the vigils that were being held every Wednesday from 1967 to 1973 that were organized by Charlotte Adams, who's listed as one of the names there. My mother had been raising 6 kids and really did not see herself as an activist, but she told us near the end of her life about reading an article in her doctor's office about Vietnam. And it opened her eyes, and she just said, "This is not right. I have to do something about this." And she also told us that the first time that she joined the vigil line, she couldn't sleep the night before because my dad was teaching at the university, and it didn't fit her conception of what a faculty wife was supposed to do, and what would people think of her, what would our neighbors think. But of course, she went ahead and stood on the vigil line, and it changed her life. And it changed my life too.
Need to be something that people will recognize, people will see, people that's walking down the street that may not know nothing about the Peace and Justice Plaza. Look over there and be able to see it, and then walk up to it and see what it is. As far as I know, at Chapel Hill High School for the Hall of Fame for sports, you know, they had a big trophy case and you could see it. But now they just got names like on the wall. And if you don't know it's there, you're not going to go look at it. But if something need to be, bring your attention to it. You know, if you're not from Chapel Hill, you just come here, you walk down there and you see something, and you walk up to it, you read the history, and then you'll know. So I don't know how, if they put something on the wall with just names. Maybe something like what we have down at Lincoln.
I think we should have a gateway built there so that we can move those names up on a pedestal and like a walk wall. I think so that people walking, looking ahead, they're not looking down. They would be able to see this gateway with these names and a little bit of description about what they have done in Chapel Hill. I think the students who come here, again, there are black students who come here, never go to Northside, don't even know where Hargraves is, simply because the university does not want them to engage with the black community here, because they become, once they get in our community, we kind of nurture them and let them know that we're your community and your family away from your family. You know, kids come here from all over, and that when they meet people from the black community, make them feel at home. And so I think that's really, really important to have that Peace and Justice Plaza highlighted. You know, put a waterfall there, like small waterfall. I see it everywhere, so that it can get the attention of white folks who come here who think that, you know, white folks built Chapel Hill, but it didn't.
One thing that it reminded me of was this book, The Freemen. This is my copy. That if you first start getting into researching, local black history or civil rights history in this area, That's the first thing that everybody tells you that you need to read. And it is a fantastic resource. It's a terrific piece of journalism, especially for a historical event, because typically when you read a book like that, it's done many years after the fact, compiled by interviews and documents, and it's sometimes unreliable. But John Ely actually left his job working for the governor of North Carolina at the time to write this book. So he was here as this movement was happening and chronicled it. The problem with the book, however, is that while it does do a good job, the story centers the white students at Carolina who were a prominent part of the movement at that time. But when John Ely started writing this book, the movement had been already going on for a few years at that point. And the book very heavily centers these white students, but they weren't even in the years when Ely was chronicling it, they weren't the leaders of it. They were just stepping out. They were the faces in some ways for certain parts of the community. One of those students, Pat Cusick, actually said 10 years later in an oral history interview about the book, he said, one of the problems I had with his book, it's the totally wrong perspective. It was the high school in Chapel Hill that was the movement, and Harold Foster was their spokesman. And there were others of us that were in the committee, but we weren't leading them. We were their spokesman. And so the fact that this book has become kind of the Bible of the local civil rights movement is just another, it's just another example that Peace and Justice Plaza has followed, in that where the local Black people are often marginalized, if not completely forgotten or written out of the story.
There was a time that the white establishment would just only go to certain people in the community, and whatever they said, that was it. They didn't talk to other people. And I think that was one of the biggest problems. Probably still is one of the problems in Chapel Hill Carberry community.
And another relevant historical fact that came to my mind about Peace and Justice Plaza as well, in which the local Black people were written out of the story altogether, was perhaps the most seminal moment in Chapel Hill history, when the cornerstone of Old East was laid at what is considered to be the birth date of the university in 1793. This is such a prominent date on the calendar that the university celebrates it every year with a big ceremony. And I learned also while I was researching James Cates and looking at old local newspapers that they actually used to reenact the cornerstone ceremony as part of that celebration. When inside the post office where Peace and Justice Plaza is, there's a large mural depicting the cornerstone ceremony. And there are 21 people that are depicted in this mural, all of whom are white. And on one hand, first pass, you may think that that makes sense. The university was founded by rich white men. It makes sense that they were the ones at the center of the ceremony. But at that time, half of Chapel Hill was Black, and all of these founders of the university were enslavers. And so it would have been very unlikely that they were there without some of the enslaved people around as well. And in fact, in some other research I was doing, I came across an old article in which a descendant of one of those university founders said that in family lore, this is the Macaulays, the white Macaulays, and their family lore, they say that when the cornerstone was being placed in that ceremony, the rope that was holding it actually broke. And Matthew Macaulay, who was one of the original donors of land for the university, who was there helping preside over the ceremony, told one of his enslaved men, whose name was Dave, who was very large, anecdotally 6'5", 300 pounds, and told him to go pick up the stone and put it in its place. So not only were black people very likely at this ceremony, but it was likely an enslaved black man who actually placed the cornerstone for that seminal moment of Chapel Hill's birth.
Just like any other place in the South, we were, picketing and demonstrating for civil rights, not just civil rights, but equal rights. So we repeat this, we hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal. We're all created equal, but we're treated entirely different in this world that we live in today. I think that, again, once we, as a nation, and as a race and a culture of people, begin to love one another and be able to let everybody move that wants to move, and that we cannot be holding them back, that we'll do much better as a nation. We'll do better as a Chapel Hill. Again,